So we will start with our Patanjali Yoga Sutra studies. We've covered quite a bit of information in our last teacher training. So I'm sure you have revised it because I'm not going to start from the scratch. I'm going to assume some prior knowledge which you have. But just to revise the basics. We are studying the Yoga Sutra. Now, Yoga Sutra is one of the main texts or scriptures of yoga. It was authored by Maharishi Patanjali. Maharishi means the great sage. Around, they say, 400 BC to 200 AD, any time between that. It is very hard to date such scriptures because they come from antiquity. And there's no really any reference to date them apart from cross-reference with other scriptures and via language, philology. Now, they say that Patanjali, Maharishi Patanjali, codified the Yoga Sutra. Codified means the knowledge of what is given in Yoga Sutra already existed. Patanjali actually compiled it from various sources and his own experiences. So Patanjali is not a inventor of this method. Patanjali is a compiler of this orientation of yoga. I call this orientation. The reason I call this as orientation is because, as we know, the end point of yoga is moksha. Moksha means being liberated from false identity, being liberated from wrong perception of yourself and the world. So, the end goal of yoga is moksha through the state of samadhi. This is a common goal of yoga. Now, there are many paths or many orientations of yoga that take us to that state of moksha. Patanjali's yoga is one of the orientations. This orientation takes into consideration the subject matter of mind. Remember that. As the popular narrative of modern yoga goes, I want to remind you that Patanjali's Yoga Sutra has nothing to do with the body. Patanjali's Yoga Sutra takes into consideration mind as its field of operation. So we can understand Patanjali's Yoga Sutra to be an orientation of sorting out your mind, or clearing your mind, or realigning your mind till the mind becomes so pure that it only reflects the true self, the Purusha. There are other paths to moksha, like the path of karma yoga, path of bhakti yoga, path of hatha yoga. There are many paths, there are many orientations. Patanjali's orientation is one of the orientations. So we can say Patanjali is giving us the method of mind mastery. Mind mastery, mastering the mind. That is why it is also called as the Raja Yoga. The Patanjali system is also called Raja Yoga, just like Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga. Patanjali's orientation is called Raja Yoga. Raj means king or a royalty. So why a king? Because once you master your mind, you become the true owner of everything that the mind reveals to you. Means, just like the king is an owner of everything, every property, every person in the kingdom, right from the bullock cart to the citizen to the natural resources, the king of that kingdom is the final authority of everything, every person, every natural resources of that kingdom. Same way, once you know how to regulate your mind, or once you know how to master your mind, you become the final or ultimate owner of everything that the mind reveals to you. This is called Raja Yoga. Kingly Yoga, roughly translated as Kingly Yoga. Many books, they say that this yoga was used by kings, and that's why it's called a Raja Yoga, but I don't really think it is like that. We should not take literal meanings of words in Sanskrit. Sanskrit is a very contextual language. One word can have multiple meanings depending on multiple contexts. So we have to be intelligent enough to decipher the meaning depending on the context. Through the book Yoga Sutra, Patanjali gives us a methodology or an orientation, or I would like to call it as a model to reach moksha. That model is called the model of Ashtanga Yoga. Ashtanga Yoga. Ashtanga Yoga. The word Ashtanga Yoga is made of three words: Ashta, A-S-H-T-A, Anga, A-N-G-A, and Yoga, Y-O-G-A. Ashta means 8, Anga means auxiliaries. I do not want to call it limbs. You have heard of this translation, 8 limbs of yoga. But again, Sanskrit is a contextual language. If it is a body, it is called limbs. But if it is not a physical body, it is called components or auxiliaries. So it is not fair to call something non-living like a Yoga Sutra model as limbs. So in a correct sense, you can say the yoga of 8 components or 8 auxiliaries, if you really want the proper philosophical word. Eight steps, it's completely wrong. It's a wrong translation, steps. So we will call it 8 components or 8 auxiliaries. So what are these 8 components of this model? Now I want to clarify something. In many schools in modern yoga, people think that this is the only philosophy of yoga that is existing. This is completely wrong. Whenever they talk about yoga philosophy, the first thing that comes out of their mouth is Yoga Sutra. Yoga Sutra is one of the many philosophical books of yoga. You cannot generalize yoga philosophy just by quoting or teaching Yoga Sutra. Sorry. You must have heard yoga philosophy lecture, and they open their mouth and start with Yoga Sutra. So what the world thinks that Yoga Sutra is the only philosophy. No. It's not like that. Yoga is not a religion or spiritual path of one book, like perhaps other spiritual paths. There are multiple scriptures of yoga. And the interesting part is, many of the scriptures, in their theoretical basis, may be mutually opposing. What means mutually opposing? Mutually opposing means there are some scriptures of Yoga Sutra, some scriptures of yoga, they don't feel it necessary to mention or to bring into the conversation the topic of God or divinity. We have studied one scripture like that, Sankhya Karika. But on the other hand, there are scriptures like Bhagavata Purana, basically the life story of Krishna, which say there is nothing else to discuss except divinity. And the reason I am telling you all this is because don't get tied down by one version of yoga. I'm not saying about style, that is asana. One version of yoga means, on one end, yoga is purely like physics. On the other end, yoga is purely like poetry. The beauty of yogic system is that both these considerations were okay. It was okay to not think of divinity and still reach your true self. And it was okay to think of the true self as divinity and reach it. It was okay. There was enough space. There was enough space for exploration in your own path. So don't get fooled by the narrative that Patanjali's Yoga Sutra is the only yoga philosophy. It's not that way. Yoga philosophy as a subject is very diverse and vast. It really takes you a very big mind and a clear mind to really learn yoga philosophy. Otherwise, what happens? With a immature mind, if you learn yoga philosophy, you will say, oh, but this book says like this and that book says like this. So then you will think that they are opposing each other and you will have doubt about it in your mind, but it is not like that. You went to the Guru came from a certain orientation of yoga, you studied under the Guru, you self-realized under the Guru, and that's it. You had nothing to do what others are doing, which orientation others are following, and things like that. Is this clear? For example, Patanjali gives us the yoga of 8 components, 8 auxiliaries. But there are many yogas of many auxiliaries. For example, Hatha Yoga. Majority of Hatha Yoga is 6 auxiliaries. Shadanga Yoga they call it. 6 components. There are some mystics who have given many more components. There was one mystic called Adi Shankaracharya, his photo is here. He gave a model of 14 components. So, that is another myth that we have to bust here, is that the path of yoga has many components. Is this clear? Different scriptures can give you different models. They are just models. You don't have to confuse between models. But there is a very common thread between all these models. And that common thread between all these models is, this is important for us to understand. The common thread between all the models is, these models take us from outward orientation to inward orientation. Whichever model you follow, model of bhakti, model of karma, model of jnana, model of hatha, doesn't matter. All the models take you from an externally engaged mind to an internally focused mind. So all these models have a common goal. The primary goal of all these models is to break us away from the sense and external interaction and to bring the mind inward. Is this clear? To break the mind away from external indulgences like senses, temporary attachments, overemphasis of transitional nature of the world, to pull the mind away from all these engagements and to turn the mind inward. Once the mind is turned inward, once the mind does not waste its time and energy in focusing on external things, then the mind is focused more and more and more inward till the Purusha or the true self is completely experienced. So the second part of the model is Antaranga Sadhana. A-N-T-A-R, Antar or Antar, Anga, A-N-G-A, Sadhana. The inward practices. So no matter which orientation of yoga you follow, any orientation of yoga will take you from an externally indulged mind to an internally focused mind. Is this clear? In Patanjali's model, the first 5 components from yama to pratyahara. So yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara. First 5 components are external practices or bahiranga sadhana. And the 3 later practices, that is dharana, dhyana, samadhi, are the internal practices. The technical name of what Patanjali has given us is called Patanjala Yoga Shastra. In traditional schools, they don't call it Patanjali Yoga or Yoga Sutra or Ashtanga Yoga. We call it Patanjala Yoga, Y-O-G-A, Shastra, S-H-A-S-T-R-A, Shastra. Means the yoga science of Patanjali. But the reason it becomes Patanjala is grammatical. It's grammatical Sanskrit. You cannot say Patanjali Yoga Shastra or Patanjali Yoga Sutra. Patanjala means the one that comes from. Traditionally, Patanjala Yoga Sutra or Yoga Shastra is studied along with the commentary. Now if you just see the Patanjali's Yoga Sutra book, there is no commentary. He straight away gives each sutra and doesn't explain it. Isn't it? It's just pure sutra. There's no explanation. So, there was another sage called Vyasa. The spelling is V-Y-A-S-A. Vyasa. V-Y-A-S-A. Vyasa. So Maharishi Vyasa or Sage Vyasa wrote a commentary on it. And that commentary is called as Vyasa Bhashya. V-Y-A-S-A Bhashya. B-H-A-S-H-Y-A. B-H-A-S-H-Y-A. Because, to tell you the truth, if you just open the Patanjali Yoga Sutra, it's very difficult to understand. Very, very difficult to understand. That's why if you see, majority of Yoga Sutra workshops that happen nowadays, they are only at the level of Yama and Niyama. You open any flyer or any website and see the Yoga Sutra workshop, maximum they will be talking about Yama, Niyama, Asana or Pranayama. Because the other stages or the philosophical chunk of Patanjali Yoga Sutra is very difficult to understand. And especially if you have not understood the Sankhya Yoga or Sankhya Karika, it is even more difficult. Now you all know what is Purusha, what is Prakriti, at least the basic knowledge you have. So it is easier for you to understand Yoga Sutra of Patanjali. Vyasa Bhashya. So traditionally, Patanjali Yoga Sutra or Patanjali Yoga Shastra was studied with a commentary of Vyasa Bhashya. So our study will happen parallelly with the commentary of Vyasa Bhashya. Okay. Now you all know the first 4 verses, right? Atha yoganushasanam yoga chitta vritti nirodha tada drushtu swarupe avasthanam and vritti sarupyam itaratra. If you don't know these 4 verses, then you should know. You cannot call yourself a yoga teacher if you have not even opened Yoga Sutra book after your 200-hour or 300-hour course. As a student of yoga, it is your responsibility to continue your studies. Just by wearing mala and stretching towards your knees does not make you a yogi. Even a dog does that. You have to be very, very responsible about calling yourself a yoga teacher. And if you are a yoga teacher, there are certain responsibilities on your head. And responsibility of not just looking like a yoga teacher, but also studying, self-study. Studying the self and self-study, both. So I assume you know the first 4 lines of Yoga Sutra, and I'll continue with the rest. If you still don't know the first 4 lines, then you have enough time today to go through your book and revise. I'm sure you will remember what we discussed in our 200-hour course. Now, according to Vyasa, the aspirants after yoga are divided into 3 classes. The aspirants after yoga are divided into 3 classes. The first class is called Arurukshu. So the spelling is Arurukshu. There's a double R, so it's a good exercise for your tongue. So let's repeat it 3 times. Arurukshu. 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 Arurukshu means the aspiring yogi. The second one is Yunjana. 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 Yunjana means the yogi who is actually engaged in practice. The seeker or the student who is actually engaged. The first one was who? Aspirant. The third one is Yogarudha. Yoga. Yoga. Rudha. Yogarudha. Yogarudha means one who has attained the yoga or the goal of yoga. Yogarudha means, literally means one who has reached the peak of yoga. Peak of yoga, that is moksha or achieved samadhi. So it is a reflection exercise for all of you to decide where you are. I am not going to tell you, you have to decide where you are. Now, assuming that we are number 2, we will discuss chapter number 2. First chapter is pretty complex. Second chapter is pretty understandable. But before that, another supplement by Vyasa. Vyasa says that our mind has 5 states. There are 5 states of mind. Or you can say planes of mind. The first one is called Kshipta. Kshipta. The spelling is Kshipta. K is not silent. So repeat after me. Kshipta. 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 Kshipta means completely disturbed. Completely disturbed mind. The second plane of mind is Mudha. Mudha means Mudha. Mudha. Mudha means forgetful or lazy. full of tamas, unmotivated. None of you are in this, otherwise you would not be here. The third plane of mind is vikshipta. So look at the first kshipta spelling and add a VI in front of it. VIKSHIPTA. Vikshipta. Vikshipta means oscillating. Oscillating, never steady. So dominance of water element and air element. Basically, you can say that. So the kshipta mind would be fire element. The mudha mind would be too much earth element, rigidity, right? And the vikshipta mind would be water element, air element, always, never steady. Then there are two more. The fourth one is called ekagra. E-K-A-G-R-A. Ekagra. Ekagra. E-K-A-G-R-A. Ekagra means one-pointed, single-minded, one-pointed. And the last one is a niruddha. 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 Niruddha means restrained. Restrained. Now remember the second line of Yoga Sutra. Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. It's the same Nirodha and Niruddha. Nirodha means restraint. And the mind that is restrained is Niruddha. The one that is restrained is Nirodha. And the one that is restrained is Niruddha. So you see the journey, our journey. Now the moksha is attained or samadhi is achieved only at Niruddha state. So first 5 limbs will fit where? You see the obvious flow. First 5 limbs are for first 3. Then comes the state of dharana, that is not meditation, concentration. Assuming concentration happens, so you can say, I'm a little lenient, so you can say 6, 7 ekagra. Actually it is 7. The dhyana happens in ekagra. The meditation happens in one-pointed state of mind, isn't it? And then after that is samadhi. So this is our journey. And that's why we do what we do. Where do you see yourself in these 5? In fact, in the further discussion of yoga, the first two are not even considered. The first two are usually assumed under the three. So they will not say Kshipta and Muda, they will just call it Vikshipta. Because if your mind is oscillating, that means it is lazy, forgetful, completely uncontrollable, and all these different colors of the mind are under oscillating mind. Oscillating mind is a generic term to say a mind that is not focused. So you can say an unfocused mind as a whole, and then a focused mind and a liberated mind straight away. Is this clear? Understood?